Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take the ride with me as we get true first-hand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. Whether it's in Mario, the myth of Santa Claus, or various other depictions, no other mushroom is as well known and popularized as that of Amanita Muscaria. That being said, this mushroom has also been shrouded in mystery as other psychedelic mushrooms become more and more popular in today's world. Today's guest on the show is an Amanita expert and also owns the largest Amanita-based company in the world. He found the Amanita mushroom when he was moving through challenges of his own related to addiction and trauma, and has now made it his life's mission to make this mushroom and the information behind it more available through his business, Minnesota Nice Ethnobotanicals, so that more individuals can benefit from this common and very potent mushroom the same way he and thousands of his customers have as well. So please give me a big hand as I welcome my man Christian Rasmussen to the show. Christian Rasmussen, my man, I am super excited to have you here with me today. Like I said in the intro to everyone listening, Christian and I met a little while back, and I was just amazed at what he's done with Amanita and also other medicines as well. Blue Lotus, Kanna, and some others we'll get into too. But man, I'm super excited to have you here with me today, man. How you doing today, brother?
I'm doing great, man. Really happy to be here as well. Thank you. Thank you.
Heck yeah. Yeah, you're very welcome, man. For everyone listening, Christian and I were just getting into a lot of cool sovereignty stuff and diving in before we got started on, how we can take ourselves out of the system and a lot of fun stuff that I've had on the show before. You guys can check out Brandon Joe Williams' episode. But that's not why we're here today. Why we're here today is to talk everything about your story, brother. And we're going to get into Amanita and all the juicy things you do in your business. But, before we get into all that, I'd love to create some context around like how you first got interested in the idea of psychedelics and alternative healthcare, because Amanita is not like a traditional psychedelic like most people think it is, but it is what I would call alternative healthcare. It's incredible for subconscious reprogramming. I've had some really powerful experiences with it. Again, I'm very new to it, so I'm excited to learn a lot today. But how'd you first get interested in these realms, bro?
Yeah, well, I mean, at 13, 14, I became like an Arrowhead junkie, if you're familiar with Arrowhead, the website. Yeah, so I mean, I was delving into that, multiple hours a day, just kind of digesting all of the information that I could, wanting to try everything, which I pretty much did through, my teenage years and into my early 20s. Yeah, so I've always been really interested in it. There's been this magnetic pull, it's been meant to be a part of my story since the beginning, and I felt that calling. I also dealt with a lot of addiction issues growing up, and I'll skip over a lot of the story here, but in my 20s I got addicted to benzodiazepines, Xanax, Klonopin, actually via prescriptions as well, but I was teetering on the legal realm and the street realm as well. But I was also addicted to opiates and whatnot. I ended up using kratom to get off of opiates in my mid-20s, and that was kind of the first real push into alternative healthcare practices. However, I didn't make anything of it. I was in real estate at the time. But then at 29, I decided to get off benzos, which is the worst thing to get off of, period, bar none. Nothing comes anywhere near it. It's so awful. I would get off heroin, 5 times in a row before getting off benzos again, because it lasts so long. So it lasts and it's not, they call it post-acute withdrawal syndrome. It's really after the actual withdrawal period, which is just the drug getting out of your system, which lasts maybe a couple weeks, maybe a month. The post-acute withdrawal syndrome is really brain damage that you're dealing with benzodiazepine specifically. I mean, it damaged the glutamate system and then the GABA system. So I was off of them for a year, and I was in just I barely healed, it felt like just a smidge. I was a smidge better than when I got off of them initially. I've had these magnetic allures to various plant medicines throughout my life. Like I had this like heart pull to use DMT, or like when I use DMT, it's because like she's there beckoning me and I can feel the call. Well, I found some Amanita growing by my parents' house. It was actually a year to the day that I got off of benzos, which is an interesting, fun synchronicity. I had the strongest allure that I've ever had. Like I've been able to ignore those from time to time with something like psilocybin or DMT, where I'll just kind of like push it out of my mind. But there was no ignoring this one. It was the strongest pull I've ever experienced. So I picked them and I went to the house and to my parents' house, and I did some research, and everywhere it was, these are poisonous, these are toxic, don't consume. Stories of Paul Stamets eating heroic doses and having a bad experience because he didn't prepare them properly and he didn't understand dosing protocol, et cetera, et cetera. And then there was one woman, Amanita Dreamer, who was discussing how she used Amanita to get off of benzodiazepines and heal her brain from her withdrawal or her brain damage, in essence. And she had a very different protocol of microdosing Amanita and then taking medium doses as opposed to these heroic doses, which are phenomenal too for certain people. But when I initially started, it was microdosing and medium doses, we'll say. So and it turns out Amanita hits the glutamate system and the GABA system, the two systems that benzodiazepines damage. And within a week or two of microdosing with a couple medium doses throughout, it felt like I had healed 2 years worth of time. So it's just unbelievably miraculous for me. I mean, I was destitute. I was like at the end of my road. It was unbelievably brutal. So it was miraculous. I reached out to. And again, so like I've been in business my whole life, but I wasn't thinking about like starting an Amanita business at this point. It just wasn't on my radar. I actually had a CBD business at this time that I started right when I got off benzos because I wanted something to do through this time period, which was a really great idea and also was a bad idea because it was unbelievably hard. Being in terror the entire time. But yeah, I reached out to Amanita Dreamer. Expressed my gratitude. I ended up sponsoring a video that she did. She took a heroic dose of psilocybin and recorded it and documented it all. And I sponsored that video, which is kind of fun. Oh. One thing led to another. And about a year after that, so this was mid-2021, she asked me to start selling Amanita because nobody in the country was doing it, particularly to scale. There were a couple foragers and stuff. But yeah, started the business up, and one thing's led to another, and here we are, the largest importer, distributor, retailer in the world, saving thousands and thousands and thousands of people's lives. It's been amazing.
Dude, what an amazing story, man, because there was so much gold in there. First of all, I imagine for many of you guys listening, either you yourself or someone has struggled with addiction of some sort. And, we've heard about things like Ibogaine or whatnot specifically for opiates, but we haven't really heard anything about benzos specifically, or at least I haven't, So the idea that Amanita can support with, I imagine, many different types of addiction too, but especially benzos, because I know those have a very specific challenge to them. I've had friends that were on them prescribed for when they were younger, and then they get older and they start realizing they want to get off of them. And my friend would always describe these brain shocks that would happen when he tried to get off of them.
Yeah.
And so like
the zaps are horrible.
Yeah. And it was just brutal. I mean, he was living with me for a little while. This is when we were like 18. And I remember he would like really want to get off of them, but he would say his eyes would close in, like almost tunnel vision, and all these really weird things that were really hard to understand before I had, experienced different types of states and things like that. But, my mother has also struggled with things like that, getting prescribed things and them becoming dependent on it because, when you take it every day, it's going to form some type of dependency. And, the typical addiction model is just so ridiculously stupid, in my opinion. It's either like you're going to get on something that's a less evil, like, methadone or Suboxone if you're addicted to opiates, or you're going to go to full abstinence type thing and get into AA and be terrified of ever being around the substance or anyone using it again. And to me, both those things don't equate to freedom. And, again, I'm not here to knock those things if they've supported people. I'm grateful for that. But I know for me as an individual, those types of things would not work for me. Because for me, knowing the identity work I do, I would never want to start every meeting with, hi, I'm so-and-so and I am still an addict. I understand why they may say that in terms of naivety of like, don't be naive enough to think that you don't still have that pattern in you. But I don't like the fact that they keep you right where you don't want to be. You know, it's like when they tell race car drivers, like, if you're spinning out, don't look at the wall, because wherever attention goes, energy flows. And so at the end of the day, it's amazing to see how psychedelics, Amanita, cannabis, etc., are supporting people in breaking through these very challenging to break addictions. You know, like, again, you know, alcohol and things like that are challenging enough in and of themselves. But when you get into pharmaceuticals and things like that, now, like you said, you're messing up certain neurotransmitter channels and things like that. And we know full well, you know, based on the research we've seen, that psilocybin has amazing benefits for neurogenesis, and other medicines do too. But I think this is really cool because we don't hear a lot about Amanita with regards to being able to support us in these ways. And I'm curious for you, you were talking about like medium dosing and dosing in general. And a question I have is, you know, if someone's listening to this right now and they're like, wow, this sounds really cool. Maybe I have a family or a friend who's addicted to benzos, or maybe I just have some stuff, you know, some subconscious reprogramming I want to do. What would you do, or what would you relay to them in terms of dosing? Is it similar for everyone, or is it different, like cannabis edibles, for instance? Is it similar or different?
Yeah, I mean, there's a dose response curve for sure, and it seems to be a little bit vaster or wider with Amanita than a lot of other substances. But generally, microdosing is where people would want to start, and then you can titrate up or down as you see fit. Another one of the efficacy is not just, I mean, it's a broad scope of efficacy. So people will use it for, you know, insomnia or anxiety. It's a much more natural alternative than something like benzos, that can also help with processing past traumas or reprogramming the subconscious mind. But yeah, microdosing is generally the best place to start. That's generally around 200 milligrams to 2 grams or so, depending on the person. And then I mean, it's a lot. A lot of people get concerned about the dosing because they equate it to psilocybin. It's very different. Like, a heroic dose on psilocybin is 5 grams. A heroic dose on Amanita is like 15 grams plus. Not everybody likes the heroic doses. I love them. A handful of people love them, but it's not everybody's cup of tea. Really, most everybody likes the microdoses to low to medium doses. It's almost in some sense similar in the medium dose range to like a spiritual earthy Xanax in a sense. But then there's no, and that's a hard, it's hard to equate it to that, but like that's kind of the best thing that we have. But yeah, microdosing is the best place to start generally. People will start with, you know, 300 milligrams to a gram, 2 to 3 times a day, and they'll titrate up or down as they see fit. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Yeah, when I had experimented with it, I think I had done 2 grams at night before I went to bed. I did that for, I don't know, a little while, maybe a month or so. And I noticed a lot of really profound things taking place. First of all, dreams were wild, absolutely crazy. Just like some of the wildest stuff I was seeing in my dreams. And then when I would wake up in the morning, I would have this, you know, call to go journal. And it was almost like in the morning when I woke up, I had to like process what I had just seen, what I had just unlocked, etc. And it was very interesting. And I found that it mixed very well for me personally with cannabis. Like if I would take a 2 gram dose and, you know, then wait about an hour and then connect with a little bit of cannabis, and then maybe go into like a nighttime meditation. So not fully asleep, but not fully awake either, kind of in that like alpha brainwave state. I found a lot of, you know, congruency and a lot of really good value there. I've never tried taking them during the day, which I've been super interested to try. Would you say that, does it bring on any feelings of drowsiness or anything like that? Or is it more just like kind of, you don't really feel it much, but it's just kind of working behind the scenes? Hey, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you all know that the doors are officially open for the Conscious Cannabis Collective. And as such, this is the last week you can sign up and receive all of the bonuses we're currently including. This is the last time I will be personally onboarding those of you who sign up with a complimentary one-on-one session, and you'll have the ability to get the Grow with Cannabis course for free during this limited time. For more info on how you can take advantage of this offer, head down to the show notes for this episode and secure your spot today, as we only have so many spots left and they are filling up quickly. Now back to the show.
Well, I mean, there's not really drowsiness if taken during the day. It has muscarine in it, which is it affects acetylcholine. So it
Mm,
has this like and acetylcholine is what a lot of the nootropics or smart drugs affect. So it
mm,
has this like cognitive enhancing aspect to it.
mm,
It almost puts one into the flow state. Like if I'm playing piano, just like taking a gram or two prior to playing piano, like it's amazing. Like I can just flow and jam, and we find that's consistent with athletes or writers or even academic students. Yeah, so it promotes the flow state during
mm,
the day. I mean, and at night too. Yeah, it almost gives one what they need at the specific time of day that they're taking it. Where like it helps calm the thought processes. It also helps us connect to a higher level of thought processing, which is, and that's like the reason that I've taken psychedelics throughout my life is because, I mean, yeah, the experiences are great, meeting entities is great, and like having those connections is awesome. But for me, it's how it changes the way that I'm able to perceive and realize, make real my thought processes. It gives weight to thought. So like you're able to choose the higher thought. You're able to align with love more or align with the intellect more or whatever it is. And then it gives weight to those thoughts, which allow your manifestation or your world to bring those to you a little bit better and more efficiently.
mm.
But yeah, I mean, it really gives people kind of what they need at the day, or depending on where it is in the day. And taking it during the day is, I think there's a big benefit to taking it consistently and kind of having it build up in your system and having it do all of that work behind the scenes consistently. And then particularly at night, if it's been doing work on you through the day, at night when you take it and go to sleep, like all that work can be processed and made real.
Wow. That's awesome, dude. I love that. I think it's so cool too because, Amanita, as I've, seen it anyway, I'm sure at higher doses, it gets a little more intoxicating, but it's not intoxicating throughout the day, right? If you're taking small doses, like,
Right.
would you recommend that, and again, this is kind of like tactile, but I'm just curious, but would you recommend when people take it, they don't operate machinery, things like that? Is there a certain dose level, just so our listeners are aware of kind of like what the kind of, and I imagine physiology is different. Like I know for psilocybin, some people half gram is nothing. Some people a half gram is a
Right.
lot. Is that similar with Amanita? Have you seen that happen with any clients or in yourself or friends or family with like, or does it seem like the dose strength is kind of similar or synonymous across person to person?
No, yeah, there's definitely a dose response curve for sure. So like some people, I have an associate who like 2 grams and he's like full blown heroic, and that he's an outlier, but like he can't work off 2 grams. I'll take 5 grams and I can drive, at like 6 7 grams. That's where I'm kind of like, probably shouldn't be driving. But and again, and that's going to be different for everybody. Generally, it seems that the low dose range is like 2 to 5 grams, generally, not consistent with everybody. And then the medium dose range, which is kind of like where, you should start being careful about driving or working. Like, that's generally around like 5 to 9, 5 to 10 grams.
Mm,
So yeah, anything for most people, anything under 5 grams, they're going to be able to operate just fine. It's gonna be a great enhancement to the day. Hitting the GABA system, our inhibitory system, it relaxes us, it opens us up, it opens our heart, it allows for increased sociability. Like I mentioned, that flow state. So you're just kind of on point, yeah, on point. But
yeah.
yeah, and then it gets intoxicating for sure at higher levels. But it's a different. We call it the divine inebriant, like because it's a different like in looking at people, it can almost seem like they're drunk in the much higher doses, but it's such a different. It hits the GABA system, very similarly, honestly, to something like Ambien or these
Mm,
Z drugs, these like Lunesta. It hits the glutamate system as an agonist of NMDA receptors, just like ketamine does. So in lower doses, that can help with things like focus or neuroplasticity, neurogenesis, et cetera, et cetera. In higher doses, it's got a strong dissociative aspect to it. And then, like I mentioned, the cholinergic system, which, can increase verbal affluency, memory recall, all that good stuff. Yeah, it does so much. And then there's also new data coming out that says it has bufotenine in it,
mm.
which is a potent tryptamine, 5-HT2A psychedelic. And at these heroic dose levels, you can kind of sense a little bit of that, but it's at such a small amount so in microdosing Amanita, or taking low doses, you're microdosing maybe a micro dose of an actual tryptamine as well, assuming these studies are correct. So it just kind of gets you. It's all encompassing, which is really cool. And I think it's also so important to note and so fun to note that it's the most iconic mushroom in the world. Like, period. It's in Alice in Wonderland, Mario Brothers, like kids' TV shows, books, stories. Like, if you ask a child to draw a mushroom, they're gonna draw the Amanita muscaria like 10 out of 10 times. It's just, and they might not even have ever seen it. Like, it's just, there's something in our DNA. Like, there's this, yeah, it's programmed into us. And then we see also, like, when people use it and it clicks for them, like, it seems to me like this dormant DNA is being activated, like something shifts, and they're just like, yeah, the amount of transformation and healing that it brings to people is just like, it's unlike anything I've ever seen. And then I think it's also really interesting to note that, like, the earliest depictions of Adam and Eve were depicted not covering themselves with fig leaves, but covering themselves with Amanita muscaria caps. Or, like, I mean, it's depicted through many religious arts, like the Vedic, the Soma from the Vedic hymns, the drink of the gods. Like, it's very likely that was Amanita. We can't say for sure. But yeah, so it's so embedded in our history and in our religious structure and in our spiritual structure. And it's so interesting that it's really starting to come out at this time, this period in history where we're beginning to break down the chains and the dogmas and step into a new world. It's kind of like Graham Hancock says, like, that it's so interesting that ayahuasca is spreading her vines around the world to reach up and touch various people. For me, it's the same with Amanita. It's the mycelial network is, covering the world, which it has been covering the world the whole time. It grows on all continents, but it's reaching up to, to bring various people in that feel the calling. And from my perspective, like, I just feel so blessed and honored to be able to be one of the people that's at the forefront of this and bringing it out. It's just such a beautiful, inspiring for me thing to be a part of. And
Yeah.
That was a long tangent, but,
dude, I loved that tangent, bro. Send it. Dude, I think it's so cool too, because, for me, I specialize with cannabis, and there's some similarities in terms of research, right? Like, there's been very little research on cannabis, even less, I imagine, on Amanita, right? Maybe now it's exploding, but it's almost like this pivotal time where, those of us that connect with these medicines, we know what we're feeling, but now science is validating it. And the thing that you have to be careful of course, right, with anything is that the pharma companies are not the ones funding the studies, because then they have a predisposition or a certain bias towards a certain result. And we've seen that happen with cannabis. There's a great book that came out recently called Up in Smoke, or it's from Seeing Through the Smoke. That's what it's named. It's from this guy, Peter Grinspoon, whose father was Lester Grinspoon, one of the biggest cannabis advocates and, ever. He wrote Marijuana Reconsidered in, I think, 1971. And he worked at Harvard. He was a Harvard MD. And so it was very revolutionary for someone to be coming out and saying, like, hey, actually, this plant is actually really useful. And in that book, Seeing Through the Smoke, Peter actually breaks down every single study that has negatively correlated, like negative results with cannabis, and broke down where the funding came from, what their entire objective was, and the fact that for cannabis anyway, and I'm not sure if Amanita falls into the same category or same kind of area, but for cannabis, if a researcher wants to gain funding to go research cannabis, they will not get funded unless they have a preconceived notion that they want, what they want to find is a harm. So if you try to go to any of these organizations and say, hey, I'm looking to see if, what cannabis's effects are on the brain, they will not fund that. What you have to do is go, hey, I'm looking to see what cannabis's detrimental effects are on the brain. Oh, you want detriment? Here you go. Here's your funding. And if you start to find positive benefit, they'll pull your funding. And so you can look at NIDA, who supplies all the cannabis for these state-run, funded studies. That cannabis, Lester and Peter nicknamed the strain that they use Moldy Mush. It's literally the worst strain of cannabis you could possibly ever get, grown terribly with mold on it. Yeah, and that's what they make you use for any study, along with having to find a detriment, So it's like, I wonder if that research has been flawed just a little bit, right? So I'm wondering if, Amanita is falling into that same category, or if maybe the pharma companies are starting to find there's something useful there. And so they're going to find some kind of benefit to it. I'm not sure if they can get a patent on anything to do with Amanita, but those are the things we all got to be aware of, because, the powers that shouldn't be, they are very aware of the power behind psychedelics. And that's why they've been trying to thwart them for so long.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious for you, man, like when it comes to Amanita, I'm just curious for your personal experience, like what is the most wild experience you've had? And what do these higher dose experiences feel like? Because out of any medicine I've ever had on the show before, there's never been more curiosity, but also kind of fear and trepidation around high dose of Amanita. It's almost like high dose edibles for cannabis, right? Like most people are just like, I just don't do it, like it's too challenging an experience. But I'd love to hear from you what those high dose experiences are like, and what, if any, experiences have really stuck out to you that have been like awe-inspiring.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I've had a lot of fun, absolutely. But I think, it's important to note that with the GABA and with the glutamate, so you're dissociated and then you're relaxed, that it takes out a lot of like the concern and the anxiety that can go along with some of these. It's kind of like ketamine, super high doses of ketamine. Like you're so detached from what's like, yeah, it could be scary for sure. Like if one's not ready for it, particularly if they don't know what they're getting into, but you're detached from what's going on to the point where like it relaxes you. Like there's not as much concern. The couple things so there's a strong dissociation. There's a delirium aspect from the cholinergic activity. So something like, in like Don Juan, Carlos Castaneda's books, like they do a lot of work with Datura, I believe, or one of the variants of that. There's an aspect of it that's like that, where it can be there can be some delirium thought loops and thought patterns, which can be extraordinarily spiritual and extraordinarily like deep hitting. They can also be very delusional. That's up to that. And I think a lot of that kind of goes back to the intention of the user that's getting into it. Where like if somebody's using it to get high, like they're probably and they take really large doses, they're probably going to have some delusional thought loops. If they're using it for progression of their soul or their psyche or their consciousness and evolution, like it's probably going to be a little bit more in line with the spiritual aspect. But yeah, there's a dissociative aspect to it, very similar to ketamine in some sense. There's this connection with these just like super upper level thought patterns and thought processing. So you can you can tap into these streams of consciousness that are so above and beyond our normal waking consciousness, similarly to something like ayahuasca or psilocybin, but it's got its own flavor, or ketamine, but it has its own flavor. Like it has its own flavor, and I think it's kind of like it's part of a well-rounded like sphere of different substances that can heighten the caliber of your thought processes. There can be muscle jerks, muscle twitching. I mean, most people get that, and that's generally the first thing that people get concerned about if they're using large doses. The body high in large doses can be amazing, but it can also be kind of uncomfortable at times, particularly in the really high doses. Like I mentioned, 15 grams plus is a heroic dose. For me, getting past like 22, 23 grams, like that body high is uncomfortable. It just is. But what else is going on is incredible. So for me, I like it. Again, that's like not many people are going to like that. If somebody likes the 10, 12 grams, then try the 15 a little plus, see how it works. But yeah, don't just go for 20 or 30 grams like Paul Stamets did and just like think that it's going to be a good time. And then there's the muscle twitching that freaks people out the most first, and then the next thing that freaks people out is thought loops. So like you'll get stuck in a loop and you'll keep doing the same thing and you don't remember doing it. And I've learned that can be one of the most beneficial things in the world for working through trauma. So like if you're knocking the door, and like the ability, and you don't remember any of it, the ability to get through various things or to drive home various realizations, like, or understandings, like it can be an unbelievably potent tool, like unlike anything else. However, if you're not prepared for it, it's going to freak you out a little bit. So that's another aspect to it. I think the dreams The waking dreams and the dreams are kind of where it gets really, really magical. So like kind of drifting in between half sleep and half awake. And I've had dreams that are just, I mean, they're straight up like DMT experiences with a different flavor, but like full on entities, full on like I mean, it's psychedelia for sure.
Mm.
And that can be really, really powerful. I've had experiences where I've felt what it was like to be the one or the creator and experience life through every single different human on the planet. And initially I was experiencing all the great stuff that humans can go through, and I was so excited. And then I started experiencing all the really bad stuff that humans can go through. And it was very, very, very difficult. It was really painful, but it was so enlightening. It was so informing, and it increased my empathy by like magnitudes. Like that was probably, and there's a big depth to that experience that I don't even know how to describe or translate. But yeah, it was powerful. It was very powerful. And I've had a handful of experiences like that. Most of my experiences at those levels, or really with my whole psychedelic journey, has been showing me what my life is supposed to be and opening doors for this story that I'm living out. In which, like, if what I've started with this business and what we're going to be doing is kind of from what I've seen and been shown, is the first phase of a many phase system, and helping heal the planet and the people on the planet. But so for me, like that's the biggest thing. But it's also so personal and so hard to like relate forward, that it's hard to like accurately depict. There's also a lot to it that like I kind of been shown, like, you gotta not talk about this stuff yet, bro. Like, just wait. Like, you got steps to go through first. So we'll get to that at some point, maybe in a year or two. We can do this again, and I can dig a little bit deeper. But yeah, that's the stuff. That's the real big stuff for me. Is it's shown me what I meant to do, and how, and this is consistent with DMT, and I mean, really everything out there. But it showed me from different angles, which allow me to bring it forth in a much more cohesive and concise way. So it's just such an invaluable tool for me to kind of plan and dictate my life. Yeah. Yeah. Little tangents again, but I got you.
No, dude, I love it, bro. Like, this is what I love more than anything on the show, is hearing people's experiences, right? Like, hearing what it's opened up for them. Because I think for a lot of us, we envision this great life we can live. And we, especially as kids, right, we have the superpower of imagination front and center. And I think we all have great dreams and, great goals for ourselves. And then at some point, maybe we get adulterated, right? We fall into the typical school system. We get trained to be a worker bee. People start pressuring us around 14, 15 about like, what are you going to do the rest of your life? You better know in 3 years. Yeah. And we're like, we were playing video games yesterday, eating Cheetos with our friends. Like, like no pressure, And so I think a lot of us end up falling victim to the logical mind, to trauma, to subconscious blocks, limiting beliefs, etc. And before we know it, we're in kind of a survival mechanism where we're just looking to survive. And I think that's why a lot of people end up finding substances, right? Whether it be something or a holistic like cannabis, where they become dependent on that, or something challenging like alcohol or benzos or opiates or whatever. We're all looking for some form of connection, some deeper connection, some deeper degree of fulfillment. And I think that the way in which we've been led astray to believe that if we have something wrong with us, the doctor in the white lab coat's going to know the answer is a complete thirst trap, because their whole system is to learn how to be pill pushers, basically. Mm-hmm. And I'm not generalizing. There's some great doctors out there. But if you look at the mainstream, that's typically what most doctors are trained to do, is to find a pill to fix every condition, or to treat every condition, not fix it. And so I think at a certain point, when we get sucked into that, maybe at first when you were on benzos or opiates, you found something you really liked, right? But then it spirals out of control and you want that feeling. That's all you're looking for. You're not looking to be addicted to anything. You're just looking to find more of that feeling of bliss or connection or whatever you're looking for. But by the time that you really figure out, what was going on there, it's like, oh shit, now I have an addiction to deal with, right? And with those kind of things, there is a physical component to it as well. And I just think it's really funny how, obviously when God created the earth, or source or creator created the earth and the universe or whatever, I imagine maybe they understood this, right? That this was going to happen. But it is funny how, like, a lot of the specific challenges we have right now, there are very specific plants and fungi that can support with those things, right? Like look at ibogaine for opiate dependency,
Yeah.
right? Like specifically opiates.
Yep.
And ibogaine's been around a lot longer than opiates, right? Obviously. And then look at like Amanita, right? When it comes to benzos. Look at cannabis when it comes to cancer treatment or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Look at, ayahuasca when it comes to trauma and many other things. It's very interesting how these things are here to remind us to break all the programming and patterning. And it's also funny that, when you think about religion and you think about kind of like the whole idea of believing in God and that kind of stuff, yeah, you can go to a church and you can say you believe in God, or you can go experience what God is for yourself, And for me, life is not an observation sport, like Joe Dirt said, life's a garden. You got to go dig that shit, And so at the end of the day, man, I just think it's beautiful that people like yourself are out there speaking to the benefits of these things, and also speaking to like hey, make sure you're responsible with it, right? It's not the medicine's fault if you do something dumb with it. Yeah. And that's the thing that I'm really big on with cannabis is like, stop blaming the plant for your dumb actions, right? Yeah. Like, at the end of the day, no judgment, but stop blaming the plant, right? We got to take the power back to ourselves. And one of the things I'm curious on for you, because when I was popping around on your website, I was seeing that not only do you have Amanita Muscaria, but you have other versions of Amanita or other varieties as well.
Yeah.
And I'd love to get into a little bit of that, bro, and like what the differences are there. Like, say for me, right? I'm new to Amanita. I've obviously done Amanita Muscaria in small doses, but I've never really experimented with anything else. What would you say kind of the benefits or differences are between each Amanita variety? And do you have them all on there? I know like death caps, you probably don't, but like, if you know the different varieties, if you could get into that too, that'd be cool as well.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, so the Amanita, there's hundreds of different Amanitas, and they're the two most deadly mushrooms on the planet are the death caps and the fallen angel, or the destroying angels. That's what it is. And like, so we don't want to deal with those. There's also maybe like there's probably 10, 15. No, I could be butchering that number, but there's a handful of Amanitas that have muscimol, ibotenic acid, muscarine, muscazone. The three big ones. I mean, Muscaria is the biggest one. Here in the States, we get a variety of Muscaria called Gasoi. So Amanita Muscaria variety Gasoi. I could be butchering that name too. It's spelled strangely. But that's an orange cap. That's what I get here in Minnesota. We don't sell many of those. We will, as the season comes up and we forage locally. But, I'm an importer, so we import from all over the world. But there are the two other big ones are Amanita regalis, which is the royal Amanita, and then Amanita pantherina. Regalis they're all the big cap with dots on them, which is the universal veil that has broke. Muscaria is generally red or orange. Regalis is like a dark, deep brown, and then pantherina is like a light brown gray. Regalis is, on a surface level, Regalis is about 3 times more potent than Amanita just by the composition of actives. And then pantherina is about twice as strong as Regalis, or 5 to 6 times as strong as Muscaria. On a more in-depth level, and we mentioned studies, like there's really nothing out there. I mean, there's very, very limited studies on this stuff. So we're largely going off anecdotes, and then there's some information. There's data in Russian. And fortunately I work with a lot of Russians. I don't speak Russian, so I can't go through these studies or anything, but I can ask my Russian people about, what's going on here. It sounds like Regalis potentially lacks the muscarine, which has that potent nootropic aspect to it, but also can cause for some of the potential side effects that people don't want, like sweating or dizziness. And it's interesting too. There's so much other stuff going on that we're just not aware of. But the Regalis is supposed to lack muscarine, but from a subjective level, from my subjective experience and the experience of our customers, it also seems to be just the Amanita community. It seems to be the most functional also out of the three, which means there's got to be other stuff going on. Because if like the acetylcholine aspect is limited, like what's making it less, trippy and out there or whatever. Like Regalis seems to be. Yeah, it's the most functional. I mean, that's the best way to describe it. And again, it's kind of like different cannabis strains, right? So like, if somebody that is new to it, like they're not going to really notice the difference between a strong indica and a strong sativa. Like it's just going to blast their endogenous cannabinoids at them, and they're going to feel it. So similarly with Amanita, like it takes some learning and tuning in to be able to start understanding these differences. Pantherina which is the strongest. It also sounds like, again, data is sparse, but it sounds like it has the highest concentration of bufotenine in it, giving it a little bit more of a psychedelic twinge. For me personally, and I think this is consistent with the community, Pantherina is the most for like journeying. Like and it's so strong. So like a few grams is like a heroic dose. But yeah, and like I think Paul Stamets took like 10 grams of Pantherine or something, which is like just an insane amount of like I've never gone that high. That's a huge amount. But yeah, it packs the most punch. It seems to be the most for journeying. And then the red cap, like this is kind of how I phrase it, is the red cap is the most for healing. And yeah, it's the most efficacious, I guess. Yeah. Where Regalis it's great during the day if I have business meetings and stuff to do, like a small dose of Regalis, like I'm on point. I'm really in the flow. Pantherina, if I wanna meet my people, I'll take a bunch of Pantherina. Yeah.
Dude, that is so funny, bro. I'm glad I asked you that because I've been very curious, like I've known that death caps exist, obviously, and I've known that there are different types of Amanita, but I've never really known like the differences between them. And it sounds like the pans, right, for lack of a better name, call it the short name, but the pans seem like almost similar strength to psilocybin then. Different effect, I imagine, but like similar in terms of like if they're about 6 or 7 times as powerful as Amanita.
Yeah.
That would kind of be around the same area, give or take. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, gram for gram, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay.
It's probably a little closer to like a penis envy though. But yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah. We've all had a run around with a penis envy before.
Yeah, gotta love those envious penises.
Well, it's funny, bro, because when I was a kid, in my early 20s, when I started experimenting with psilocybin, I remember going on Blue Light and these forums and, asking about different types of mushrooms, psilocybin mushrooms. And, so I was learning about wood lovers, and also they have a pan type variety. I forget the full term, it could be the same term, but basically, they were saying, well, for cubensis, a cube is a cube is a cube. Like, it's almost like saying like cannabis, there's no difference between the strains, like there's no difference. And so I remember thinking like, what? That can't be right. But I was so young, I was like 23, that I was like, well, I don't know. And then I remember the first time that like, you would just get whatever batches you could of mushrooms and, fuck around and find out basically. And sometimes we'd have these like ridiculous body highs that were just really good. And we'd usually eat around an eighth. So we'd have these body highs. Then every once in a while we'd reach like what we'd call heaven, like just pure golden light. None of us knew what the fuck was going on. And then we'd have some that were like just straight hellish, like just fucking terrifying. Sure. And then I remember one time when I started actually getting names for the different strains that I was working with, I remember this one guy gave me penis envy one time. And I remember they looked gnarly and just like really meaty and just crazy. And I was like, all right, cool, like whatever. And so we made an 18-gram tea of them between me and 2 of my friends. And we fucked around and we found out hard, bro. I literally thought I was going to die. Like I've never been that terrified on a psychedelic ever. That's when I learned. And it was funny though, because they are great teachers, the PEs, because they're almost like sarcastic and have a really good sense of humor is what I've noticed about them.
I like that. Sarcastic is really good. Yeah.
Yeah. Like they're almost like, they're like, all right, yeah, we'll show you all the secrets of the universe. But before that, we're going to fuck with you hard and just make sure that you can handle it. So like what happened to me was at that point in my life, I would watch funny movies when I would take psilocybin. I didn't really understand the spiritual implications yet. So I'm sitting there watching this show called Decker, which is like the most ridiculous shit ever. It's Tim Heidecker and Eric, I forget his last name, but Tim and Eric, that show. It's one of their knockoff shows of that. And I remember I was laughing so hard that it triggered a visceral response that I was choking. And then whatever thought form came into my head was, you ate mold, right? Those mushrooms are moldy. Your throat's now closing up and you're going to die. Yeah. And it happened so quick, Christian, that like there was no stopping it. By the time that like I was trying to, I switched off the movie. I was trying to play it cool. Like, oh, I just want to listen to music. And like, I switched off the movie and I sit back down and like, I'm okay. And every time I would say I'm okay, the voice in my head would say, no, you're not. And so I messed with that for like a minute. And then I went to the bathroom and tried to puke and I wouldn't puke. And I literally thought I was going to die. I was pacing around. And I remember in my head, I was like, should I call 911? And like the overwhelming voice was like, no. And I was like, okay, I'm not doing that. And then after about 5 minutes, I realized, wait a minute, my throat isn't closed yet. I'm not dying. And then that's when they were like, we had to check you before you wrecked you. Now
Yeah.
cool. Now go lay down and see some cool visuals, like it was almost like they were fucking with me,
Yeah.
And I remember I gained a lot of respect for them after that. And since that time, I've really only messed with them in small doses. I've had like a gram, and that's been really enjoyable. But I always if I'm going to dose heavy now, I just go for golden teachers every time.
For sure.
It's just easier.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think
So
I think it's so interesting that pharmacologically we don't. I mean, yeah, penis envy is a lot stronger. Like, there's more psilocybin and psilocin, but it doesn't account for how B plus versus albino, A plus versus golden teachers. Like, it doesn't account for the difference in experience. There's an energetic component to it, which is we don't know how to measure except for anecdotally and experientially. But that it's such an interesting aspect of psychedelics in particular, or even pharmaceuticals, or I deal with some compounds as well that we're working on bringing out. They're also extremely healing. But if one compound is synthesized different ways, even if it's the exact same compound, it can have very different effects. It's just we don't understand why. It's so interesting to me. It's so fascinating.
Yeah, it really is, man. There's, it's very similar to, I imagine, the feeling that cowboys used to feel, right, in the 1800s, where they had no idea what they were going to run into, but it was one big adventure, scary, albeit, right, at times, right, potentially danger and things like that. But, at the same time, it feels like that with psychedelics right now, cannabis, Amanita, combo, etc. That for me personally, I don't need to see a study to believe in something. I know a lot of people do. I don't really care. For me, I actually take the opposite. If there's not a study about it, if people are telling me from the government that it's bad, I'm give me some of that right away, because I've just learned over time, whatever the government / powers that shouldn't be say, take the opposite. And that's probably more accurate than the actionable thing they're saying. And so for me, I've enjoyed greatly this idea of being my own little scientist and being my own science, experiment where, for me, I know that psychedelics at this point have helped me so much. I was just talking to a buddy of mine about this. We were both at a mystery school, was very against plant medicine. And it was very weird to me, I understand the idea of be aware, be conscious with the medicine, things like that. I can also understand a lineage saying, hey, we don't work with them, so we don't recommend them. I respect that, But when you start shit talking psychedelics and saying oh, you're not a plant. What could a plant teach you? And I'm you understand that we have our quote unquote junk DNA that is actually how we're similar to everything, including plants in the world. Yep. So it was kind of crazy to me going to the school and realizing how are you saying you're this smart and this, much of a lineage, but you're so silly when it comes to the idea that even the biggest organizations in the world are saying psychedelics are effective. Yeah. And me and him were joking about how, yeah, sure, you can go to a school like that for 10 plus years and try to work through your trauma and spend thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars, or you can go find a sitter and take 5 grams of mushrooms and do all that in 2 hours. Yep. Literally, I mean, I have worked through entire lives full of trauma in a matter of hours, because when you escape space-time and you enter time-space, you don't need actual time to go through space anymore, right? Yep. It just happens. That's why in a dream you can turn around and be in a different country, because you're not operating in the realm of having to go through space and it taking time to do so. Yeah. So it's very interesting, man. It's just a very interesting time to be in the world right now. Super cool.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I love that you bring up time space. I went to college for physics. I wanted to be a quantum physicist, and I ended up, I got out and got into business because I wanted to have an impact on the world, and I figured that would be a better way to do it. But that's my kind of talk too. Yeah, so I'm all about it. Maybe we can do another one and dig into all that at some point too, because that's a fascinatingly fun conversation, and it ties into all the stuff that we're talking about and all the other stuff that we're interested in. And yeah, that's a good, fun, beautiful rabbit hole.
It's super cool, man. And you know what I would love to know? I don't know if this links up or whatever, but I've been really getting into Jack Kruz's work. Do you know Jack Kruz, the Sunlight guy? And
no, I don't know.
I don't know if you've heard of him.
No.
Dude, definitely look this guy up. His last name is Kruse. Okay. And he is basically discovering, he is revolutionizing what we think about health. I met this guy recently who is a farmer down in Virginia. And he's when I heard him speak about it, I can't repeat it the same way he did, but he is revolutionizing what the term regenerative means when it comes to farming. Like these people that have a totally different mindset around something that we thought was pretty objective at this point, like we figured that out.
Yeah.
And this guy is doing that when it comes to health. He's saying that like literally even like one of the parts I was listening to, he did a podcast with Andrew Huberman and Rick Rubin on Rick Rubin's show. It's a 6-hour podcast in 2 parts. It's awesome, dude. You would love it because he basically was a neurosurgeon that got really heavy into physics to figure out what the hell was happening because he was overweight, did the dieting and the exercise and didn't lose really any weight, and didn't start losing weight until he started getting more sunlight. And then he started really like getting into melanin channels and how like, you know, there's melanin inside our brains and inside our bodies in places we can't even see it. And how being tan is actually the healthiest sign of being healthy that you can possibly have. And so he brings in a lot of the quantum aspects to this. And I'm just curious what he would say around psychedelics in general, but especially Amanita and what role that might play in his theory. You know, it's just so interesting, man. I didn't know if you had heard of him.
No, I haven't. I will look him up though. That is fascinating. I'm sure I'm a lot happier and on my game when I'm outside for an hour or 2 in the sun every day, like for sure. I mean that's easy to see, you know.
Oh yeah, 100%, man. And you know, I'm curious for you because you do offer like Blue Lotus, Kana, etc. Like, do you find these things combine well with Amanita? Are they separate? Can they be either or, like separate or together? Like, what have you found with regards to kind of like, what is your system, if you will, like of utilizing these different medicines? Like, is there a certain thing you go to each day? What does your own ritual or practice look like with these medicines?
Yeah, sure. Well, I don't use them. I don't use anything daily like I used to. You know, I've had such an addictive personality growing up as well, and it's trained me how to not have that thought process. I do use kratom pretty frequently though, so that's, you know, I use kratom regularly. But I mean, it's anti-addictive. It really is. Like this stuff is anti-addictive. But for synergy, I think that Blue Lotus is one of the, you know, it's one of the most sacred, revered plants in human history. Like, you know, the 1,000-petaled lotus is your crown chakra opening. Like, you know, the lotus it's related to all of our chakras. It was practiced or used in ancient Egypt. Granted, they had a stronger Blue Lotus than we have now. They had the Nelumbo nucifera versus the Kerula, which we have now. You can find Nelumbo, but it's really hard to find. But it's a lot more potent. But what we found, so Blue Lotus is the best synergizer like out of anything I've ever experienced. So like taking some Blue Lotus mixed with like psilocybin or mixed with Amanita or, you know, really anything. Like it's not like 1 + 2 = 3. It's like 1 + 2 = like 3 to the 5th, you know. It's really, really interesting. It just makes for such a different experience. Blue Lotus it's also subtle. Like it's more subtle than Amanita. Like that, it's got a diminishing returns, you know. So like 3 grams of the extract is what I refer to mostly, just because it's so good that we have. But 3 grams is not like twice as strong as 1.5 grams. It diminishes over, you know, as it increases. It's a wonderful microdose, particularly like it's relaxing. It tunes people in. It's very grounding. It really stills the thought processes. And with something like this, like you have to be kind of tuned into yourself to really start noticing the differences. And the more you are familiar with yourself, the more you watch your thoughts and feel your energy and feel other people's energy, the more effective or the more you'll notice it. But it's really wonderful for meditation, like unbelievably, like completely. If thoughts are like that, it just like, you know, it stills the mind. And then great for dreams. It's also a great aphrodisiac. But the real thing that we discovered that I think is incredible, and I'm sure they knew about this back in the day, but nobody, as far as I know, nobody has figured this out until very recently, that if one microdoses Blue Lotus consistently, so we're talking like, you know, if they're making the tea like 5 grams 3 times a day, or the extract, you know, like 1 gram of the extract or ½ gram 3 or 4 times a day, after a week or 2, their heart will start opening. Like their heart chakra will start to open, and people's capacity for love and compassion just like gets stronger and higher and higher. And like, what a cool thing! Like, how cool is that, you know? And how needed is that in this world right now? Like, it's so needed. So that's my favorite thing about Blue Lotus, which is the second most. It's the second closest to my heart out of everything else that we offer. But it's in some way it's maybe not equally as powerful as Amanita, but yeah, maybe it is. Now, and on that note too, I had mentioned I'm playing with some compounds right now, and I'm actually really excited about these. So, but Blue Lotus kind of sparked all this. Blue Lotus has two main compounds in it. One of them is nuciferin or nuciferine, however you want to pronounce it. I was able to get my hands on some pure nuciferine. It's unbelievable. It hits like every single serotonin receptor. It hits like every single dopamine receptor. And then there's so much else going on as well. Like it's psychedelic and like in its own way, it's hallucinogenic, but it's like got this euphoria. It's like, it's unbelievable. It's so cool. And like, it's in such small amounts in Blue Lotus that you would need like hundreds of grams to get like 20, 30 milligrams or whatever. I had a friend and like, we tried it and we're like, holy shit, this is amazing. And like, I just happen to know like all these people in the cannabinoid space, like Delta 8, from what I've done. So like we're getting ready to just like fill up all of the head shops with this stuff, which I think we can do pretty well, honestly, because it's so incredible. But then there's also this spiritual aspect to it that like, if like John Doe is going to the smoke shop to like get something to get him high, like there's going to be an added benefit to using this stuff. But the thing that really brought us over the edge is my friend's wife, has depression and pretty bad issues. She was bedridden for 7 days, like couldn't do anything, wanted to kill herself, suicidal, really, really, really bad state. And we were like, well, let's see how it works for her. So we gave her 20 milligrams. He gave her 20 milligrams of nuciferin. And within 45 minutes, she was back to her normal self, but better. But that's not it. Like, yeah, lots of drugs can like, snap you out and like you'll be good, but then they wear off and you're back to square one. That was 2 weeks ago, and she's still doing great. She's still doing great. So something was rewired. And like I said, like if you get like an antidepressant or something, like it's gonna bullet one aspect of a system. But like this compound, it hits all of your serotonin receptors and all of your dopamine receptors. Yeah, it's 2 weeks and she's still doing great. So like imagine the efficacy, like imagine the potential for something like that. However, like we were talking before about like patenting, like you can't patent a natural ingredient. You just can't do it. You can create a novel compound out of something and then patent that. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that this is something that, I mean, I don't know, maybe pharma's looking at it. I'm sure they're looking at Amanita. But what I think is really interesting, and one of the things that I plan to do and I would like to do, and if anybody wants to help me with this that's out there, we have a lot of plans to get it moving, but I want to bring Amanita itself through preclinical and clinical trials. Not patentable. Nobody's going to benefit off of it. It's just you can get something approved by the FDA for use, and like all of a sudden you can have doctors helping people with it. Like you could really, if somebody did that with a natural product, they could really revolutionize the entire pharmaceutical industry. People wouldn't like it. There's resistance to stuff like that, but I think that's something that I would really love to be a part of. And then there's tons of natural products that once you get the ball rolling and figure out funding, which we have some fun thoughts around. But you could really change the world by bringing one compound or one product that's natural through preclinical and clinical trials. So that's another thing that I'm very excited about. Kind of I had mentioned this story that's played out with Amanita and DMT and blah, blah, blah. That's one of the things that I was, like shown so long ago. And I was like, what? Prior to doing anything that I'm doing right now. And now looking at it, I'm like, oh, I see the path to get there. Like, yeah, that makes sense. But initially it was like, what the fuck? Like, what are you talking about? But yeah.
Yeah. Dude, that is so cool, man. And you're speaking my language, because the whole reason I do what I do with cannabis, right? Like I don't have any products or anything like that. I'm just sharing with people like, hey, you can learn to grow this plant in your own backyard that will not only support you in your life and in the lives of those you love, but it will also kickstart a revolution in your life. Because when you realize that a natural plant that you can grow in your own backyard can support you to such a high degree, you'll naturally start asking yourself, well, are there any others? And you will find an unequivocal yes. You will find there's lots of them. And when you start diving into all that, and you also start learning from people like yourself, people out there that are business owners, that are moving and shaking, that are very successful in all of the material things that people might think matter to them, but they are truly more successful in something that you can't put a price tag on, and you also can't buy whatsoever, which is true happiness, true joy, and truly being of service, truly choosing to be positively polarized in this lifetime towards service to others, and to be able to graduate this realm when we leave this realm, and not have to come repeat third density again, and I think that that's one of the things that I feel so grateful that this is the lifetime that I've tapped into this kind of stuff. Who knows if I've done it in the past, but
You definitely have.
yeah, right. Yeah. Likewise, bro. But it's like, to be able to remember these things in this lifetime and be able to share them with others and be able to learn from other people like yourself who are also remembering other plants and other compounds and other substances and medicines that can support that. I really feel like Pandora has come out of the box, and I'm not sure what the ripple effect of this is going to be, but it's already been huge. Yeah. I'm sure a lot of people. I know a lot of people whose lives have been changed forever as a result of different psychedelic medicines and just medicines in and of themselves, herbal medicines, etc. So I'm just super excited for what the future has in store, man. And dude, this has been amazing, Christian. I can't believe we already blew through an hour, bro.
Yeah.
This has been amazing. I can't wait to have you back on, bro.
Right. Yeah, this has been awesome.
Yeah, man. And I'd love if you could share with people like where they can connect with you, where can they find more out about your business. Yeah. Of course, we'll put it all in the show notes, but where can people go to find your products, man, connect with you, everything like that?
Yeah, so it's Minnesota Nice Botanicals. So if you search, on Google, I mean, honestly, if you search by Amanita, we're at the top as well. But yeah, MinnesotaNiceBotanicals.com or MN Nice Ethno. There's a bunch of URLs that we have, but Google's your friend. There's a bunch of podcasts that I've done on YouTube as well. So just, type in Christian Rasmussen, Amanita, you'll find a bunch of stuff. The website is it's a fountain of information. We're actually working on a new educational program as well. We're actually working with the founder of the Psychedelic Institute on courses for Amanita for the consumer, and then for people that want to coach people through Amanita healing sessions and whatnot. So we're working on that as well. That'll come up hopefully within the next few months. But yeah, the website, there's lots of information. All the podcasts are posted on there. We have a Discord as well. I'll send you that to put in the show notes. That's really cool. It's just a community of everybody, or a handful of people that are very loyal customers. It's a family. It's become a family, and that's the intention, and that's really what it is. I think as people kind of get tuned into this story as it's panning out, this Amanita story, or this story that I'm so graced to be a part of. I think that, and particularly if they're trying it and it's clicking for them, I think it's historical. I really, really do. I think in the future we'll look back on this conversation and some of the other things that we're working on, and some of the things that I've been shown are ahead that I'm not going to get into. But I think in looking back, it will be historical. And I think that Amanita, the most sacred mushroom in the world, the most iconic mushroom in the world, I think that it has a larger role than even I can perceive in the evolution of human consciousness. And I think that that's going to become apparent over the next handful of years. I think that watching my story, or the story of the business, or Amanita's story unfold, people will begin picking up on that more and more. So I guess the last thing that I want to leave everybody with is try it out if you're interested. It's unbelievably powerful medicine. And then if you're interested in this type of stuff, watching this story that we're a part of unfold, I think it'll be historic, and I think it'll aid in each individual's evolution as well. So I guess that's what I'd want to leave everybody with.
Dude, that is awesome, bro. And also I want to say game recognized game for your website name, Minnesota Nice. I think that's awesome. There's a guy that I met from Minnesota. He's been on the show before. His name is Scott Lindy. He runs Sun Potion. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they do a lot of different herbology type stuff. Okay. And he's from, I think, I don't know where he was from originally, but he was in Santa Monica, Santa Cruz forever. And then he decided to buy a cabin out in Minnesota, which is like the funniest transition, like from like Santa Cruz to Minnesota.
Yeah.
But he's an amazing guy. And he's the one that brought me in with awareness of being Minnesota nice. You know, like we did a podcast, and during the podcast, one of his neighbors came over and knocked on the door, and he was like, I have no idea what this is. And he went and she baked him a pie.
Yeah.
And he was like, man, people out here are just Minnesota nice, you know? So it's really cool, man, that was your website name. And I'm super excited to check out some of your products myself and experiment with them and see what I can, hit buttons with and, find out effects from. And, my last question for you, man, is this. And usually I'll do this with just psychedelics, this question, but I'm going to replace it with Amanita just because, again, our main quest today was Amanita. So let's say someone listens to this episode and they're really excited to try out Amanita Muscaria or an Amanita variety in their own life. What is the one piece of advice you would offer them to allow them to use the proper discernment in discovering whether or not Amanita is right for them at this particular time in their life?
That's a great question. I would say it's a two-parter. Start low, start slow. That's typical with all of these substances. Start low, start slow. You can always titrate up. You can always do it again later. Don't go out and take 10 grams of Pantherina like Paul Stamets. You're going to have a bad time. It's like the pizza French fry. Like, you're going to have a bad time. And then I think the biggest aspect of this is to watch your thoughts. And I think that it's one of the things that Amanita teaches or helps teach so well to people that maybe aren't like, people kind of in the space of where we're at. Like, I'm always watching, like, and I'm sure you are too. That's like, we've trained ourselves to do that. But you have like, soccer mom or like, old Dave who's an alcoholic or whatever. Like they haven't trained themselves in that. Amanita from my experience and from the experience of people that I work with, it seems like it allows us to, it helps us tune into that. But particularly in those low microdoses, people might not notice anything and they might, like a lot of people will, they'll notice they're more relaxed and happy or whatever, but some people won't. And people are missing out on so much when they're not watching how their thought processes change. I'll leave you with one story, quickly. In the beginning of all of this, I was hosting these monthly meetings with Amanita Dreamer through her platform. She's also a great source of information. So if anybody's interested, just type in Amanita Dreamer into Google and you'll find her. I was going through it. The topic was high dose entheogens, so it's just like an all encompassing. But it was an Amanita community, so people were coming in and talking about their Amanita experience. Well, there was this woman who she was like 2 weeks into her protocol. She was like, I'm just not noticing anything. And, we talked and I gave her some pointers and some tips or what she should look for. And the next month when she came back, she was done with her regimen. So she had been off of it for like 2 weeks. And she goes, I figured out what's been going on. And everybody, what's been going on? And she said, well, I realized a few days ago that voice in my head that's talking down to me has been gone for a month. She didn't realize it. And like, that's fair. Like, I understand how people won't, people aren't watching their thoughts, but like, that's the type of, it's a great story to drive home watching your thoughts is with any plant medicine is going to be how you get the most out of it. If you're not like attuned to energy, but watching your thoughts helps you tune into energy. Yeah. I could keep going on that, but I think that's the biggest thing. Watch your thoughts.
Dude. Yeah, that is very sound advice. And that's why I tell everyone, like, one of the best things you can do to supplement a psychedelic protocol of any sort is to be an avid meditator or to get into some type of spiritual practice where you contemplate a practice where you get used to watching your thoughts. Because, again, when we start putting attention there, once again, where attention goes, energy flows. Yep. And that's what I noticed about combo, specifically that exact thing.
100%.
Yeah, like the next 3-4 weeks were like no inner critic chatter. It was just quiet, like tumbleweeds blowing by. So it's interesting she had that same type of takeaway with Amanita because, combo is pretty brutal to do. Like, I'm not against doing brutal things, but at the same time, being able to just take a tincture or eat some Amanita or make a tea, much simpler than having to puke your guts up and burn yourself and put frog venom into into your burns, so I'll take that one to the bank. But
it's just a little more simple.
Yeah. Christian, this has been amazing, man. Guys, I hope you all enjoyed the show. Christian is a wealth of info when it comes to Amanita and other medicines as well, such as Blue Lotus, Kana, and all the things you heard us talk about. Make sure you check out his website, Minnesota Nice. Make sure you check out all the things he's done, his podcast, and stay up to date on everything he's doing, because if I know one thing about Christian, even though he's done so much already, he's just getting started. So hope you guys are having the best day ever wherever you're tuning in from the world. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you leave us a 5-star review. Helps us so much, and we are forever grateful. And until next time, may the force be with you to infinity and beyond, everybody. Much love for now. Bye. Woo!